Hi, we're Manuela and Denis, co-founders of Kadeya. And today we're telling the story we never really get to tell in pitch meetings or press releases, who we are and how all of this started. So before we get into it, let's have a little toast to Kadeya.
To Kadeya.
Thanks for joining us today. And Denis, great to be here after all this time getting to talk a little bit about just us.
Yeah.
So to start with, I wanted to get into a little bit of why Kadeya. And there's a lot of ways to think about that question. Excuse me. But the way I'm going to talk about it is fundamentally sustainability and convenience have been considered enemies. And I think what we're really trying to do at Kadeya is prove that sustainability and convenience can actually work together.
Yeah.
And so we just want to make sure with beverages that you're getting the best quality, lowest cost, most convenient beverage. It also just happens to be the most sustainable option. And I think that that's something that you and I really align on, having come from maybe a more traditional business background where convenience and efficiency have always been so important. So that's my why. What I want to ask you, it's funny, some of these questions I've never gotten to actually discuss with you, and the first time we're talking about it in front of everybody. So what drew you to the problem that Kadeya is solving personally, professionally, emotionally? Anything else?
I think I was at a point in my career where, I wanted to matter in the things I was doing. I was mostly spending time optimizing the old system that I think we're slowly going out of. And so I wanted to apply all the things I learned in my career into something better. So not necessarily the plastic problem or the Kadeya problem, but overall the sustainability problem, social problems. So it was important for me that my next venture would be around that idea. But actually, you had the idea first about Kadeya. So maybe you should explain also where you started that, when you were in your previous company, and all the things you did to make it work.
Sure thing. And also, I'll kick that one back to you in a moment because, there's a lot of questions around like efficiency, right? And we throw that word around a lot in business. And I think we've become a little bit like blindsided or like horseshoed into one definition of efficiency when there's so many other things we have to think about actually. So I started my career as actually my first job out of college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad was a communist. He didn't let me take an investment banking job. And I was like, okay, well, all my friends are going to New York, so I should do that too. And I got a job in advertising for a beverage brand for a Brazilian beer called Brahma. And I didn't last very long because I didn't want to just be helping people buy more stuff they didn't need. But I was totally lost. And I somehow convinced my agency to send me to China for 6 months. I told them basically, I'm the international girl on the strategy team, but I don't know anything about China. And this was 2005, 2006. Send me to China. And this will be great for business. And they did. And I got there and I was just bowled over by the massive amount of social change that was going on. And I wanted to be a part of it. And I wanted to see what was happening. So applied for a bunch of fellowships and got one to move back to Beijing and ended up staying in China for 8 years. And first I was reporting for Newsweek and the Engineering News Record and realized that I actually wanted to be building solutions, not just writing about them. And so I started my first business and I did the craziest things as a 25-year-old and made all the mistakes. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity and for my time in China. And then I ended up selling that first business, which was a market intelligence platform, got a grant from the Brazilian government, which is where I was born, and moved back to Brazil to start my second business, which is still running, called Insta Agro. And it's the third largest marketplace online for farmers in Brazil. And then got a call from the one company I ever wanted to work for, Palantir Technologies. And this is where this idea of driving efficiencies really entered my life. And we were using data to drive efficiencies. And I believe then and now that climate is fundamentally a data question and a mismatch of information. And so I wanted to learn how to do it from the best in the business, and that's Palantir. And while I was not doing anything with climate, just doing international business development, I hated all the single-use waste we were generating at the office. So I started working with the kitchen staff to launch a reusable water bottle program. And then I helped them run that for 3 years. And that was basically the first steps of Kadeya. Learned a ton, realized why reusables, as we use them today, are not going to solve the single-use problem, and then went back to business school, which is where our paths crossed. So that was a very long-winded background. But one of the things I wanted to hear from you is, you were talking about driving efficiencies, and maybe you can talk a little bit about specifically what you were doing, but also maybe you can talk about like how were those efficiencies defined? And how are some of the efficiencies we're working on now maybe slightly different?
Yeah. So I was in automation, in warehouse automation to be accurate. And I was deploying and optimizing material handling robots that move pallets autonomously. And so the idea is to be efficient in moving things around. And so this is not really an efficient way of thinking about the world, because all this movement of pallets from different countries to the US or to Europe, and then moving to another warehouse, and then to another warehouse, and then to the distribution center, and all those movements are highly inefficient. And so what I like about Kadeya is that we remove that. So the beverages are not moving from a warehouse to another. We just plug the machine into the water line, and we got the water from the tap, and then from there we bottle the beverage right at the point of consumption, which is super efficient in terms of logistics. So we try to make the beverage production efficient and not move around a lot of things, which was completely different before in my life. It was like all about moving faster, a ton of things that don't make sense.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I have so many follow-up questions, but fundamentally, I think what you're talking about is we're in this like race right now with robotics and AI and automation to make existing systems faster without stepping back to say, well, maybe we should rethink those systems from first principles.
Yeah.
Do they actually make sense? And almost making those systems more efficient, you get like percentage increases year on year. So you think you're winning. But if you were to take a minute and plan and restructure the process, you actually would get, step change improvements.
Yes, totally.
So you and I got to meet at MIT for business school. And I remember just being always very impressed by you. We didn't hang out socially that much, but always said, I'd one day really like to work with him. And I'm curious, when I reached out to you and said, hey, Denis, come join us at Kadeya, why did you want to join?
I think I already mentioned that I wanted to make an impact. And so plastics is a great cause. And I thought also it would be a system that we could make it work. So that was very important for me. And also, I come from Europe. I've been here 10 years, and I can see the gap, increasing gap every year when I come back to Europe, on how Europe is very aware of plastics and GHG and all that stuff, while we here are not that much. And so I think I really wanted to bring that onto the table and being able to make an impact here on plastics. So that's why. And also, like, the product is fun. It's a lot of robotics inside, and the team is great. So that was the motivation.
We're so grateful. Yeah, we needed you. And we can both talk about this, but for you, you mentioned you thought this product and this business could work. did you have an aha moment or a string of moments that convinced you that this idea could work?
To be fair, at the beginning, I was not sure it could work.
But you joined anyway.
Yeah, when I joined, we were, glass bottles,
Yeah.
smaller machine with a lot of challenges due to that. Early pilots.
We hadn't fully confirmed or validated our target market, our beachhead. Yeah.
And this is what I bring on the table. So I was like, okay, let's get in and dig into what the customers want, what the users want, how we can solve all those technical problems. And so I think I didn't have like a ha moment. It was like more step by step getting into something that makes sense. Maybe the biggest moment is when we talked about flavored drinks. I think at the beginning it was all about water,
Yep.
which was, very important, and we were an hydration company at that time. And then we figured that, people don't drink only water. They want enhanced beverages, either, sodas or, electrolytes, all that stuff. And they wanted to buy it at the same place. And so we had to rethink about how the machine worked to make it happen. That creates also more value. So that creates a business that makes sense. So all this, kind of came together at some point. And we were able then to really have a product that makes sense commercially and also for the users.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. That was a real turning point. And Bridget, if you're out there listening, thank you for forcing the issue and helping us rethink the business model at that time, like almost 2.5, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll ask one more question and then I'll let you also jump in. So you have engineering and automation background, startup experiences. What's your interest in hardware? Where does that come from?
That comes from very far. I've always been very, I'd say, motivated by learning how things works. So like dismounting something, learning how it works. And so mainly mechanical stuff from, fixing a bike, fixing a car, all those things when I was younger that I was doing. So that's why I've been into hardware, but actually I've been into software quite a lot also. So it's also interesting how hardware and software work together, and this is very important for our product, by the way. It's not only a machine; it's a full ecosystem of things. So and for you, I'm the product hardware guy, but you are the one with the vision and all the sustainability things you've been working on for the past 20 years. So maybe you can tell us more about this and how you got obsessed about water and plastics.
I think a lot of people probably feel this way. You are doing your best every day to avoid using plastic, and then you forget you're reusable, or and then you're thirsty and you don't want to get that bottle of water that's in plastic, but you do it anyway. Or you're at a party or at an event and all they have are cans of sparkling water, and you don't want to be that odd person to go into the kitchen and help yourself to a glass. I think there's these little moments in each of our lives where we set a goal and we might be really mission aligned, but then you start bumping up against reality and realize how much we're all swimming upstream. And I basically became that nerd who was willing to do those socially awkward things. I mean, even in business school, that was sort of my brand, which I embraced, which was like, I'm going to be the sustainability girl that everyone sort of is annoyed by or criticizes. And I decided I'm going to go live that life and see what does that do? What does that mean? And I just became really annoying. I became really annoying to everybody around me, like all my classmates, all my colleagues. My husband was like, "You're so annoying. Why are you so obsessed?" And I would come home and I'd be so mad. Why doesn't the world want to change? Why is this so difficult? And I think if you're asking yourself that question, it actually opens the opportunity to start thinking more like in systems and maybe give yourself a little bit of forgiveness to understand. Let's start exploring why, as an individual consumer, you can't solve this problem. And what are the bigger structures and incentives at play? And once I started asking that question at business school, I became a happier, nicer person. People wanted to talk to me and hang out with me. My husband was like, "Oh, you're less of a pain in the butt." And so I started really stepping back to ask just fundamental questions. Why, for example, do we have to have a totally new container every time we want to sell a beverage? Because we have this tap water infrastructure in most of the world.
Yeah.
Not the water quality isn't always consistent, but then you have filters. So you start, it's like that onion. You just start peeling back those layers. So to actually answer your question, I think it comes with my upbringing of having two academic parents who thought in systems and who, their job in life was to ask questions, and even if they were unpopular questions, to be brave enough to ask them. And I was encouraged to do that. But I also think, you and I being immigrants, I moved to the US as a kid, but being someone who has like 1 foot in, 1 foot out and doesn't ever really fit in anywhere.
Yep.
I think that's an advantage in entrepreneurship, right? Because you can coexist in multiple realities. And that's what entrepreneurship is fundamentally, is understanding what the future can look like and being willing to do the work to build that, but living in the present because you got to bring the world with you. And you have to understand what incentivizes people today.
Yeah, totally. Talking about systems, I think this is something very important in the MIT Business School
Absolutely.
world. So we went to business school together. And so what did you think about that time shared there together with 124 other people? What was your first impression of the school, and then how we met and all that stuff?
I loved MIT. It was the only school I applied to. And we did the executive program. So I looked at all the other executive programs. What struck me then, and I think is still true coming out on the other side, is that the community is simultaneously a group of the most ambitious, striving, hardworking people, and humble, curious, and willing to help others.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt that way.
Yeah, I felt the same. I only applied also to MIT. I went to different information session in other schools. That was just not my crowd. And I like the fact that people were there to learn about what the world could be. And not only about being more efficient in the world we are right now. By the way, it's not a business school, it's a management school.
Yeah.
This is the real title of the Sloan School of Management, which is a little bit different.
Yep.
Because it talks about, principal leaders and leadership, more than business optimization, which a lot of other business schools are about, and career advancement and all that. I think MIT is more about changing the world. Technically, of course, this is the main focus about the school with all the engineering people, but on the business side of things, really like help technical advancement to change the world by being, great leaders. So, yeah, that was definitely a great time.
Yeah.
You were talking about, when we met. What was your first impression when we met?
Well, I don't remember like the exact one-on-one
I don't either.
meeting. Yeah.
I don't think there was.
Yeah, I don't know if I was commuting in from New York. I was still working at Palantir for part of it. I don't know. I was just trying to make sure I, was on top of things, and I did my homework, You, I think, got to socialize a lot more.
Yeah, I was not there to study. I was there to learn, which is two different things.
Fair. Yeah.
So learning also from the other people in the group.
Yeah.
So
I do remember though the moment that kind of you were sort of marked in my brain, and I've mentioned this to you before. We took a negotiation class.
Yeah.
And we had to do a real life simulation, right? We had to negotiate with another classmate either to buy or sell a used car. And we were able to use all the market data that's available to try to sell or buy the car at a certain price. And we knew that was the obvious goal of the simulation, but there was a second goal that we had not been told about, which was, well, are you actually going to still be liked after the negotiation? And that fits into game theory, which we also studied in business school, right? The idea being in game theory, and I'm going to oversimplify it, but if you're going to have one transaction with a person, you have no incentive to be liked.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have multiple transactions, it actually benefits you to be liked and to be nice and all those other, altruistic so-called qualities. And I remember both you and I won the primary simulation. We somehow achieved the highest value capture in our sale or purchase. Yeah. But we were also the two people with the highest likability ratings after the fact.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I was like, that's someone I want to work with.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we won a beaver, by the way.
I know. And I still haven't gotten that beaver.
Yeah, no, me neither.
They told us that we won it because at that point, by the time we got the results, right, it was COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
And they told us on this chat, congratulations, you win a beaver. And everyone was like,
great.
Try not to say anything. That's the mascot for MIT.
Yeah. So, I think for me, my first impression was a little bit of the crazy lady you were mentioning about sustainability.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said about systems. I was like, how can we change something just by, doing reusable? What's the machine about? I didn't really understand at the beginning what it was. But I saw you were, very driven, very smart, and very convinced about it being a good idea. So at some point I was very impressed by that. We did entrepreneurship programs and all that stuff where I was on a very funny team. We did something that couldn't become a company, and you were still on Kadeya at that time. That was another name at that time, but So that's a good transition to, all this was kind of research, very basic, can people just make it work? But what was the first iteration of Kadeya? At that time I was not there. I joined later in the process, but what was the first thing you implemented and how did you do it?
Well, back then I was saying bike sharing for bottles, and we're still saying that.
Yeah.
So the big picture vision hasn't changed. The devil is, of course, in the details. And being at MIT, people really do take entrepreneurship seriously enough to disagree with you and to actually engage with the idea. So that was an amazing opportunity because our classmates started saying, well, how are you going to get the bottles back? I'm a sustainability nerd. I'm like, well, won't everyone just do the right thing and return their bottle for the planet? No, they will not. And for that entrepreneurship class, it was amazing because I had a group of our classmates and a professor helping structure experiments. And so the first experiments were standing outside of classrooms with glass bottles of filtered water and then testing out different prompts to see how do we get the bottles back. And we found then that if I had Sharpied numbers sequentially on these glass bottles, and then I asked the student to just write their name, phone number, email address, some identifier next to their number, they return the bottle. That was the first question. The second question, which lasted a long time for us, was how will we wash the bottles?
Yep.
And we'll talk about that in a future episode. But the third question was, what's your go to market, right? Whose problem are you solving? And that also took a long time. And I did a ton of discovery interviews. I did over 200 conversations with people thinking, oh, we're going to be in white collar offices or university campuses or airports. And COVID hit. And that was a blessing because it forced me to step back and say, wait a second, we need to be in environments where people will show up every single day. It's not an option whether you go to the office. Yep. It has to be factories and fulfillment centers and military bases. And I lucked into that really because I had just moved to Chicago, was in a sailboat on a sailing lesson with a woman from Gilbane. And she said, I can't get you in an office, but I could get you on a construction site tomorrow. And that really was how we took off, is being open to people's feedback.
So what did you do at that point? What was the first not product, but I would say prototype that you put at Gilbane Construction?
Yeah, so taking a quick step back, in the middle of COVID, we bought an old vending machine. And we basically put a vending machine in a white collar office because I hadn't realized yet the industrial work site opportunity, but they were a military technology company. So they had special permission to go to work during COVID. Mm-hmm. And so in that case, the first thing I wanted to test was, can we beat single-use plastic water bottles? So that experiment really showed us that, yes, people prefer Kadeya to single-use plastic water bottles. The second use case was at Gilbane Construction in downtown Indianapolis, October 2022. And we delivered a machine that we had built, purpose-built, to deliver bottled water that you could then return the bottle. On the back end, we were still taking the bottles off-site to wash and sanitize. But before I plugged in that machine, the project executive, Aaron Perry, who we will hear from in a future episode, asked to buy the machine. And I asked him, why would you want to buy this? You don't even know if it works. And he said, well, what am I going to do when Kadeya leaves? Go back to buying and distributing single-use plastic water bottles? And that really opened up the problem that we were actually solving, was a logistics problem.
Yeah.
So the box for the end consumer has had really like small iterations, but understanding the problem that we were solving came about 2 years in to the journey of building Kadeya.
Yeah. I think it's important what you just told everyone. The DNA of the company and is about learning from customers and from users, which is not always the case in startups, where sometimes technology is more important than solving a real problem. And it's really important to understand that the DNA of Kadeya is all about, learning from the next iteration and put all the learnings into the next iteration. It's really something that you developed that is pretty rare for someone who creates their own company with their own idea. Sometimes they're stuck on their idea and they don't want to get out of it. So one of the reasons also I joined at some point was just that, like, we can challenge ideas. Even if we have a strong drive and we know what we're doing and we know where we're going, we can challenge ideas to make the product and the company more successful. So very important in the DNA of Kadeya, I think.
Thank you. Maybe we can transition to some rapid fire reflections. And actually, you kind of started talking a little bit about this, so I'll ask first. What's one thing you thought you knew in 2020 that you now realize you were wrong about?
So in 2020, I was looking from outside at that time. And I was thinking those things would be mostly for white collar environment. That was kind of obvious. And it was the obvious because I was in a white collar environment. So right. I think you just, it's like when you hire someone that looks like you or is like you, it's a little bit the mistake we do sometimes. Yeah, so that's what I was thinking from the outside at that time.
Yeah.
And you?
I mean, so many things, right? We thought glass bottles, we thought
Yeah.
only water, we
Yeah.
thought white collar. Actually, a big one is that you've helped us transition into is we thought we needed to have our own custom bottle washing unit. And we invested a lot of time and money, and we built our own custom bottle wash unit. And now we've realized we didn't have to do that, and that there's some great off-the-shelf solutions.
Yeah. But that made sense at the time because the machine was supposed to be smaller. And we learned from customers that it could be bigger, giving a lot of opportunities for the architecture of the system. So the last questions probably we're going to cover. Who or what helped you keep going before you had proof it would work?
My husband, Andy, who is also an entrepreneur on his second company and has had a great early success with his first company, Bonobos. And knowing how much he had to struggle and hustle when he was building Bonobos. And Bonobos, it was crazy back when he was building in 2007 that you would buy pants on the internet. So seeing how he chipped away at that kind of prejudice that investors had, even when he had the data, has been really helpful to me. And I think a big part of entrepreneurship, especially as a woman, is I think we have assumptions of that things should be done a certain way, right? You read about it in the tech articles and at conferences. You hear about these great successes, and you think that it always has to be that same formula. And really, there's so many tools available. I mean, look at us here telling our story through a podcast, which I never thought we would do. So seeing that Andy also hadn't held back on trying all sorts of approaches and encouraged me to do the same really gave me permission to do things that maybe as women we wouldn't feel as comfortable or courageous to do, like asking people 10 times to invest in you, even when they tell you no. Well, the 10th time, they might invest. How about for you? Who are you grateful toward?
I think the customers or the users, I would say. I was very surprised at the beginning when I was still a little bit offside of this and starting to work with you on how to make it work. We did a pilot at a company called AbbVie, and it was a white collar pilot, so not necessarily where we end up doing, but people were so excited about this. I didn't really understand that. I was like, okay, people are excited about a new machine that is delivering bottles, and it surprised me in a good way. I was like, okay, so there's something, people are interested by it. Also, then it's new, it's innovative, it aligns with who they are in that company. So all like how we are marketing the product and all this like kind of, fell into like, I could see it like happening. So I'm grateful for that moment where the customers were excited by what we do or what we provide. And also people saying like, what, you're at the end of pilots because pilots need to end. What, you're leaving?
Yeah.
And I need to go back to like
the old way.
Yeah, the old way, like having my reusable bottle or whatever, like it's a pain. Very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm also grateful to you and to the team, to Ali Rose and Luis Torres and Liz Leonardo's, because it's really rare to have people who both are ambitious and accomplished, but also are willing to get their hands dirty, That was the pilot. I remember I showed up when the rest of the team was there and everyone was in their Kadeya t-shirts, and you've been chief customer experience officer at a massive company before, and you were there washing bottles and loading bottles in the back of a truck and carrying a printer to print out labels and sitting there signing people in.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to the team that you all have been willing to do some of those tasks that most people maybe would consider to be menial, but I think are such a big part of learning. Like, why is this business exciting?
Yeah, totally.
So to conclude this first episode, this is part of a 2-part episode. So come back next week to learn more about the product iteration and building the founding team. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Unbottled. If this episode got you thinking about plastic, systems change, or how we build a better future, don't just be a listener, be an owner. Kadeya is raising a community round on Wefunder, and that means you can invest as little as $100 and help us bring closed-loop beverage systems to more people in more places. Because real change doesn't happen alone, and the future of hydration needs all of us. Learn more and join our investor community at wefunder.com/Kadeya. That's Kadeya. The link is also in the show notes. Let's build it together.